We're joined by our Senior Advisor for Foreign Policy and National Security, Ric Grenell, former Acting Director of National Intelligence. He's been at the cabinet level when it comes to intelligence matters, and also former ambassador to Germany. Because I say all that again, Rick. I don't always go through it always, but I say it this time because I want to play for this for our audience if they missed it in the first half hour, because Benjamin Hall, it's great to see him back reporting the news again after the serious injuries he suffered covering the war in Ukraine. So interestingly enough, from his experience, he asked Secretary Blinken about our standing in the world right now. Take a listen, everybody.
Do you think that the world is now a safer place under the Biden administration than it was under the Trump administration?
In my judgment, what I can say is this. I think the standing of the United States around the world in the last few years is much stronger than it was. And you can see this in survey after survey, and I can feel it in the work that I'm doing every single day.
Okay, so Rick, I've kind of learned from you what he might be referring to there and why he wouldn't say. Let's talk about first what he wouldn't say. He would not say, Rick, that we are actually in a stronger place, because I think he even knew if he said that directly, it would be mocked widespread, maybe even by the liberal media. I mean, who were just being honest about the amount of conflict there is in the world right now.
Yeah, look, he had two caveats there. I hope people understood. The first thing he said, the first words out of his mouth were, "in my judgment," which makes it immediately say, not in everybody's judgment. I know everybody doesn't think we're safer, but I'm Secretary of State, so I'm going to say, in my judgment, in my personal opinion. That's the first caveat. The second one was that he was saying, in my circles, I'm hearing. And so what that really means is when he's at the State Department with all his other political appointees, and when he's at the cabinet meetings with all the other political appointees, we in the Biden administration are sticking together and saying things are better. And look, he's got the luxury of doing this because the media, they just parrot whatever they say. You've got somebody like John Karl, who is the ABC White House correspondent. And if you look at his reporting, his social media, it's all on Donald Trump. Here's the guy for a network who is supposed to be covering Joe Biden and the Biden administration, and John Karl cannot stop talking about Donald Trump. It's really unbelievable, but the White House knows this. Joe Biden knows this, which is why the Los Angeles Times turns over their question word for word, and everybody just does a collective yawn. The Washington, D.C. silence on that L.A. Times piece and the lack of coverage, unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, the second part, I think, Rick, we've learned from you, our audience has learned from you, is the consensus. And that Blinken might actually believe our standing in the world is better because Europeans and Western Europeans and the UN likes the Biden administration more. So in his view and judgment, even though the world seems like it's out of control and on fire in so many places, or right on the brink of being on fire in so many places, that we are more popular again at international institutions, as if that makes a big difference if we have no power on the world stage.
Yeah, one thing I've learned through diplomacy is be careful with the roar of the crowd. When the crowd is cheering you on and clapping and they're liking you, it's probably because you have an incredibly weak position and they are now able to be over you and to leverage that. And so what we know about Joe Biden is that in his 40 plus years, he likes to talk about all the world leaders that he's friends with and how much they like him. But I can tell you that, going toe-to-toe with Chancellor Merkel, someone who I respect, by the way, because she stands up for Germany, she absolutely wants a weaker United States. She does not want a United States that's telling her to pay her bills or to not build a Russian pipeline, the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. She wants a U.S. government that she can control, that when she comes to and says, hey, this is what I want, they say, oh, okay, well, let's talk about that, or let's do that. And that's what she gets with Joe Biden. There's no question. He is popular with the people who want a weaker United States because they want to be having leverage over the U.S.
Yeah, it sometimes feels like that's his own fan club, is the people who are cheering on the weakness of the United States. And we saw that a little bit at the Correspondents' Dinner. It feels like he said it became just a joke, like that everything. Obviously, you want to have fun at those events. They're made for comedy. But when some of the jokes are, I don't take questions from interviews or I prep stuff, you're like, well, yeah, okay, at least you're acknowledging the fact that it's not just it's not just an old man thing. It's the fact that you are refusing to answer these questions. You bring up the fact that they're always constantly blaming the Trump administration still, whether that's in the press or actually within the administration. It seems like at this point, 3 years in, but you're right. They know if they do it, they get press.
The silent message from that White House Correspondents' Dinner, which the media in that room all missed, was, I don't need to answer questions because you guys are giving me the best coverage I've ever seen in my entire life, so I'm going to keep going.
Why would you be the person who goes out there and wants to get those questions? You don't. Yeah,
but we just got to comment on Rumble. This is interesting because I like that our viewers and the people that engage in our show, Rick, are deep thinkers when it comes to stuff, and they don't just go immediately to maybe the conflict zones that they're seeing in the world, like Ukraine or Sudan. But they actually wrote in and said they believe that the Saudi-Iran deal is probably the worst failure so far of the Biden administration. What would be your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very good comment because it really changes us historically for a long time. I'm not sure I could come up with what is the worst deal because there's so many bad ones. But when you go around the world, I don't think that there's a country that is in better shape under the Biden administration. I mean, you look through the Middle East, you look through Asia, Latin America, even Europe. I mean, Europe has had their borders rewritten now with a huge, massive war under Joe Biden. European leaders need to get much stronger and much louder about this. But one of the benefits that the European leaders have is the Biden administration is paying the bill. The American taxpayer is paying the bill. But I think the Rumble comment is a good one because it's fundamentally changing the Middle East for a very long time. I don't think that you can overemphasize the move that China has been making over the last couple of years because all of the Democrats and media in Washington keep saying Russia, Russia, Russia. And meanwhile, Beijing loves it because they're doing all this under the radar stuff. You look at what's happening in Africa, the African leadership having enough. They literally are now talking that and complaining that the Biden administration is talking down to them. That's pretty much a red alert for America and a newsflash to the Chinese to move further into Africa.
Blinken also got asked about his role in the laptop story. That's because the CIA director at the time, Mike Morrell, his friend, said, I wasn't even thinking about a letter like this until I got a call from Anthony Blinken about it. And then Anthony Blinken got asked about it on Fox News. He's being asked to come testify to Congress on it because now he's kind of conflicting, though if you listen closely, I don't think he's actually denying any of that. But I wanted to play this one for you, Rick, too, and get your reaction.
Can you explain what your role was in that and if you incentivized it?
Well, first, one of the great benefits of this job is that I don't do politics and don't engage in it. But with regard to that letter, I didn't wasn't my idea, didn't ask for it, didn't solicit it, and I think the testimony that the former Deputy Director of the CIA, Mike Morrell, put forward confirms that.
So another very carefully chosen words, like it wasn't my idea, the letter. He didn't ask for it or solicit it, which is the same thing saying twice. But, Rick, again, it's like the question he got about are we in a better place in the world. When he gets asked about this, he doesn't deny that he talked to Mike Morrell about it, so he doesn't want to call his friend a liar. But he tries to, again, shift the focus. He's not a political actor, but he was at the time. He was a political advisor to the Biden campaign when this letter was being drafted.
Yeah, look, he's not very good at messaging because the first thing that he says is, I don't do politics, which innately means that letter was politics. And so I can't answer that because I don't do politics at all. So I'm not going to answer that question. So he gives himself away as that was politics. But the reality is, you hit it, Jordan. He is saying, well, I wasn't the author. Well, we're not suggesting that you have to be the author to be in trouble here. What he did do, if you read the memo, what Mike Morrell says that he did do is he called up people, including Mike Morrell, and said, wow, did you see this Washington Post story that the Russians might be responsible for Hunter Biden's laptop? Well, I'm very concerned about that. Now, look, in political world, we know what that means. It means that if you want to please this administration or that campaign, the Biden campaign, and Blinken was on the Biden campaign, if you want to please them, then you better respond and say, yeah, I'm just as outraged as you are. But here's the clincher. The Biden campaign placed that Washington Post story saying that it could be Russian disinformation, could be. Washington Post is saying, oh, well, we only said that it could be. And now everybody's running fast by jumping to conclusions after that. That's the Washington Post position. But this is all a game. They knew what they were doing. 3 weeks before the election, they're telling everybody, don't look at that laptop. It's Russian disinformation. Look over there at Russia. And meanwhile, Beijing was applauding.
I'm sure they've got something they're cooking now in preparation for who may be Donald Trump again. He's wondering what they're cooking up this time. Is Rick. As always, we appreciate all of your insight into that on the foreign policy side, on the domestic side.